Today, we're going to be talking about 5 tips to run insane routes. So this first tip is going to be how you can avoid getting jammed by a physical press coverage DB. So I'm sure you guys all saw this clip of Tyreek Hill in the playoff game getting jammed pretty much to the ground. Now, obviously, there's snow on the ground. It's not the best conditions, but there are a few mechanical things that he could clean up here that can help all of you avoid this from happening. We're also going to be showing a correct example of this exact situation with a DB who lunges with Justin Jefferson, and he doesn't get jammed, and we're going to compare and contrast the two for the first tip. So first things first, guys, you got to have your hands ready to go. I understand, like, the conditions are not the greatest. He's got his hands in his hand warmer, so I totally understand that. I've never played in 0-degree weather, below 20 weather, but still, at the end of the day, you can't have your hands like this. This is the same thing as wide receivers who have their hands X'd across their knee or hands waiting on their knee, because when a DB sees that, he knows that you're going to be just a half a second behind, but a half a second makes a big difference, especially when you have a physical guy who is going to lunge at you. So that's number one. So you got to make sure that we have our hands ready to go, because when we have to take my hands out, it puts me a half a second behind. Same thing when my hands are X'd on my knee because guys are trying to look cool. So make sure that my hands are ready to go. I'm not saying you have to hold them up by your chest and be super tense with them, but have them ready to go. Now, second thing is that when you get a physical DB, we cannot lean back and expose my chest, especially Tyreek Hill. Again, fastest player in the NFL, insane athleticism, but he's not the biggest guy in the world. I don't know if you've ever seen him in person, but he's not the tallest dude in the world. So, and again, this is a big reason why when he's ever running with the ball in his hands, he either gets out of bounds or he gets down because he can't take a lot of hits at his size. So if you're a shorter wide receiver out of the slot, we cannot stand up in the air with my chest with my release. If I'm doing like a split release, I'm doing some type of a lateral move, I got to keep a slight forward lean with my pad level. The second I stand up and expose my chest is the second that when that guy gets hands, I am going to be knocked off balance. Whether it's a slippery, snowy surface or whether it's a clean turf, perfectly balanced surface, right? So guys, we have to make sure that I have my hands ready to go, and we got to make sure that I don't pop up my chest when I'm facing a physical press coverage guy. So like I said, we're going to show the same exact press coverage example here from Justin Jefferson and break down what he did correctly. So obviously Jefferson's here. He's in a stack formation. So this is a formation where he cannot go backwards. He has to go forwards. So DBs, when they see this stack formation a lot, will lunge, will jam, and try to get hands. So how was Jefferson able to get off of this press coverage? Look, but before we get into this, fellas, if you're a wide receiver and you would like to train with us this offseason, we are going to be coming out to 12 more cities across the U.S. for 2-day-long QB and wide receiver training camps. So if you guys would like some more information on how you could sign up for any one of these states that we are coming to you guys, check out that very first link in the description below. That's where you can get all the information and where you can sign up. Our next 2 camps in Charlotte, North Carolina, that camp is completely sold out, but then we'll be heading out to Portland, Oregon, Dallas, Texas. Our Nashville camp is completely sold out. Then we'll be heading out to Chicago, Buffalo, Atlanta, Houston, Philly, Detroit, Boise, and Los Angeles. So like I said, fellas, if you guys are local to one of those cities, we would love to have you out to one of our off-season camps. So check out that very first link in the description below. Let's get back to this video. So now we got Justin Jefferson here, same type of example. I want you to pay attention first and foremost with his hands, right? His hands are ready to go. They're not sitting down below his knees. A lot of wide receivers sit with their hands really low. His hands are not X'd. His hands are in a relaxed position, ready to go. Guys, and I say it a lot too, I don't want your hands up by your chest super tense, because if you're super tense, you're not going to have any range of motion. You want to be relaxed, but you want to be ready. So when this DB lunges at him, pay attention to his pad level. His pad level is the key as to why he's able to get off of this press coverage. Look, he does not stand up. Now, Jefferson, again, is a little bit taller than Tyreek Hill, a little bit bigger, but he's not the thickest guy. He's not the strongest guy on the field. He is fairly skinny. Again, Tyreek Hill is a guy I got to meet and was able to meet in person, and same with Justin Jefferson. Got to meet both of them in person. Jefferson is insanely tall, very lanky dude, but he is not the thickest dude in the world. He is very, very skinny, so he's probably not the strongest. And you get some DBs who are trying to be physical for that specific reason, because I'm sure a lot of you wide receivers watching this are maybe not on the thicker side of things, but pay attention to his pad level. He comes off, he does this split release move. I love a split release when we have a physical DB, because your base is in a strong position, but if you pretend to keep your head underneath a small doorway. That's what I'll tell my wide receivers. Pretend there's a doorway. You don't want to pop up and hit your head on the doorway. Give yourself that slight forward lean with your upper body. I say think of it like you're pulling a sled. I'm sure all of you have seen like for speed training, guys guys run with a sled. They have a forward lean. That's how I want your pad level on any release when you're attacking a DB or trying to make him miss lateral. So when he does get hands, I'm not screwed. If my hands are ready to go, I could swat, I could go because I was in that explosive position. Now, a lot of you guys are probably wondering, well, coach, couldn't we also like do a step back release where I step back off the line? I'm sure you could do that. That's a fair release to use. But again, this is a stack formation. He can't do that. He has to get vertical on his route. So your pad level and your hands being ready to go is the first key. First tip to being able to beat a physical DB and to run insane routes. Now, second thing I want to talk about, second tip is going to be taking what the DB gives you on your route. So what do I mean by that? So what I mean is that if you have an outside breaking route, like an out route, like a corner route, like a comeback, like a fade, you don't automatically have to take an outside release unless it's a mandatory outside release. But you got to get comfortable, and this is what they will ask you to do at the next level, releasing opposite of the DB's leverage, even when you have an outside breaking route. So let's show this a clip here from Devonta Smith. So he does this move, gives a jab, attacks the DB's leverage, inside release, gives a move at the top, and he runs this out route. So why am I telling you about this? Why is it important to get comfortable doing this? Because guys, on routes, you need to give the quarterback room to throw you open. You need to give him space on your routes. So a lot of guys, because they have to run an outside breaking route, even if they see outside shade press, they'll come off the ball and they're like, oh, I have to take an outside release. So the DB's on their inside hip and they could break to the out route. It's the path of least resistance, I guess you could say, right? They want it to be, but it will actually be the path of most resistance, because when a DB is lined up in outside shade press, why is it important to recognize that? Because it's showing you what he is trying to accomplish with his look, what he's trying to accomplish with this coverage. He doesn't want you to get to the outside. So if you force it to the outside, a disciplined DB is going to keep his leverage, he's going to get hands on you, and he is going to force you to the sideline. So when you break on your out route, yeah, maybe you got around him, but you have like a yard, 2 yards of space. A quarterback will never throw that. So what we got to get comfortable doing is releasing inside, even when I have an outside breaking route. So Smith off the ball, he does a great job attacking the DB's leverage. He acts like he's almost going to the outside, gives a fake to the outside. Very, very simple, right? There are a million different releases you could use in this situation, but that keeps this DB honest. It gets him to keep his leverage to the outside, so I can take a free release to the inside. Guys, the whole goal of a DB in press coverage is to get hands on you, to disrupt the timing, and to reroute you to mess up the spacing. If I can attack him and take the release that he is giving me, which is the inside release, I'm going to keep timing with my quarterback, and I hope I'm going to keep spacing. That's why it's important to attack his leverage. If you just take off and run, he's going to get hands and force you inside. But if you attack his leverage and then take the inside release, you can keep timing, and it will help you do something called getting skinny on your route, which is how you keep spacing. You don't get forced way to the inside. Now, in this specific situation, we kept timing, we kept spacing with my release, but now my separation is won and lost at the top of the route. So my main goal against any type of press coverage, whether I have a DB who's inside shade or outside shade, would be to stack. So what is stacking? Stacking is when I get over the top of the DB and he is trailing my back hip. This is a perfect example of this from Devonta Smith. Now, when he stacks him here, now I have a two-way go, as I say. You could either break to the inside or you could break to the outside. You could sell like you're going to the inside and then go to the outside, which is what he ultimately does. He uses this move called a rocker step, which is a break in the direction you are going first. So it's a 1-2. So it's 2 steps at the top of the break, but you step where you are running first. So he gives this 1-2, acts like he's running an inside breaking route, gets separation from the DB, and now we actually have space for the quarterback to lead me. Guys, trust me, the quarterback would rather have a fraction of a second slower break, but with space to actually throw you open, than, oh, I got to the outside, I was able to use a speed cut, but there's no room to do it. Now, some of you might be asking, well, coach, what if this DB's faster than me? What if I can't stack over the top of him? So we're going to show you an example of that right now, and that would be using something called a throw-by move. So now, let's look at this next example. So same type of press coverage, look. Outside shade press, this receiver is going to be running a 10-yard out. So he gives this move off the ball, attacks him, takes the inside release, isn't able to stack, puts the brakes on, slips underneath the DB. Look at all the space that he has for the quarterback to throw him open. That is what I am talking about, fellas. Guys, if you want to be a good route runner, you have to be able to do this kind of stuff. You have to be able to trust your hips. You got to trust your release. You have to trust your break. At the top of the route, that is what gets you separation. Off the line keeps timing, keeps spacing. Top of the route, that's where we get open. So again, he attacks his leverage, just like we were talking about in the last example. Keep that DB honest. Take the inside release. If I can't stack him, okay, fine. I put the brakes on with my hips. I'm dropping violently. I'm sitting down into my chair. An analogy I tell my receivers in this situation is you want to try to tie your shoes with your hands. If you drop down and you could touch your shoes with your hands and you sit your butt down like you're playing musical chairs and you do that violently, you're going to be able to decelerate. And if you could decelerate quickly like this, it makes it very easy to slip under this DB and execute this throw throw by move. You could also use this hand, if we are a little tighter to the DB, to swat his shoulder, swat his hip while you are slipping under to get you a little bit more separation. But again, it's all about giving that quarterback spacing. So let's play this full speed one more time. Again, 2 examples of taking what the DB gives you, but 2 different breaks that you can use based on the reaction from that DB. So now, third tip to run insane routes, guys, is going to be making your routes look the same. So some of the best route runners in the game are all able to pair their routes together, whether that's moves at the top of the break or whether that's releases off the line of scrimmage. So look at this route from Stephon Diggs. He's running a fade route. Josh Allen ultimately overthrows him on this, but this is a great example of making your routes look the same. So Diggs comes off going up against Jalen Ramsey, hits him with this 1-2. Ramsey stumbles, and you see the amount of separation he's able to get. Ball was unfortunately overthrown, but let's talk about it, right? So he uses that like rocker step move that we were showing Devonta Smith use, where you step in the direction you're going first. So he's taking an inside release on this fade. Now, this isn't for every situation, right? Because sometimes there is something called an MOR. An MOR is a mandatory outside release. This is not a mandatory outside release situation. So this is more like a 4 verts concept, right? A mandatory outside release is where I have like 2 receivers. I'll draw it on the screen right here. Outside receivers running a fade, slot receivers running an out. So this is an MOR fade because we're trying to get the corner out of there to throw an out route. But if it's like a situation where it's like 4 verts where I have 2 fades, this is not a mandatory outside release. You can take an inside release. So what he does here is he uses that like rocker step that we talked about. We step in the direction that I'm going first. It's a hard step, and I am pushing off of this step to sell to the outside. Now, why is he doing this, and why is he attacking the inside hip and inside shoulder of Ramsey when he's doing this? He is trying to make this fade route look like how he would run an out route. So guys, if you had this zone coverage look and you had an outside shade DB and you had to run a 10-yard out, and the Bills run that 10-yard out a lot with Stephon Diggs and with Gabe Davis, what you would do is you would not try to run to the outside, because remember, this DB, when he's outside shade, whether it's press, like we just talked about, or whether he's off in zone, he does not want to give up the outside release. So he's not going to let you run to the outside. His job is prevent anything outside and force you inside to his help. So a great wide receiver knows that if I'm running my 10-yard out, I'm going to attack his inside hip. I'm going to attack his inside shoulder. My goal is to get him to flip his hips open to the fade. I have to sell vertical. So when I get him to flip his hips, I maybe cut off of my inside foot and I slip under him, so I have all of this room to be able to run my out route. Very, very similar to the throw-by example that we covered in the last clip versus Marlon Humphreys. So now what a great receiver will do is make his routes look the same. So he comes off here, he makes that hard plant, hips and shoulders look like he is going to the out route. That gets that DB to hesitate, and then bam, we have that inside release. I could use this on a post, I could use it on a dig, I could use it on a fade. I could use it on anything inside breaking or even a fade where I take an inside release. He makes it look the same. So remember, when a DB is watching us or guarding us, I should say, an off man or maybe zone turns into off man, he is watching my hips. So when we decide to make a move, guys, we have to make sure in this situation, your belly button is almost turning to the sideline. Your hips and shoulders are turning to the sideline to sell this. It's not going to work if we just step. But it's going to work if we step hard, we're attacking the right angle of his hip and shoulder, and we use my body to sell the move. Let's play this again, full speed one more time. Great job by Diggs making his routes look the same. Now, next tip for you guys to be able to run insane routes is having violent hips at the top of the break. We briefly talked about this in the example with that throw by 10-yard out, but I want to go over it again just so you guys understand how important it is to be explosive. So a DB guarding us man-to-man, we already talked about this. What is he watching? He is watching our hips, right? So when a DB is watching my hips, the slower I drop my hips into the break, the more time he has to react. So guys, when you are running a route, like let's say it's a curl like this situation, let's say it's a comeback, let's say it's a dig, let's say sometimes in some cases a throw by out route, let's say maybe it's like a 5-yard hitch. When you're dropping your hips, guys, it needs to be a quick drop on my hips. We don't want to give this DB any more time to react than he already has. So when you guys drop into a break, obviously what we're trying to make him think is we're running a fade. We're trying to run full stride, trying to run with good speed, good body language. So how I decelerate is by using something called a trigger step. A trigger step is the first step of when you guys drop your hips into a break. And that step needs to be violent. So an easy key phrase that I'll tell my receivers, think about a string is attached to your chin and you are pulling the string straight down to your knee as quickly as you can. So when you guys drop to that low spot violently, gives the DB less time to recover and we could stop quicker. The quicker you get into the break, the quicker you get out of the break. So let's play this again, full speed one more time. Great example of why having violent hips is so important for route runners to get in and out of their breaks faster. Now, next thing I would like to talk about, fifth tip for wide receivers to be elite, to be an elite route runner, is to take what the DB gives you in terms of a reaction. So we talked about it, right? DB's inside shade, and Lamb is running a post right here. DB's inside shade. So what would we do? Would we force the inside release, or would we attack him inside and take the outside release? We'd attack him inside and take the outside release. Because remember, his goal is do not give up the inside. But there are going to be cases where we may have to react on the fly as a receiver. And sometimes this DB may not play the way we think he's going to play. So that a great receiver is a great reactionary receiver, right? You have to be able to react on the fly and do it quickly. So watch what Lamb does here. He attacks his leverage, but the DB does not move. Okay, cool. I'm going to take what he gives me, which is the inside release now. And this is the name of the game with this position, guys. Because I talk a lot about, wide receivers need to have a plan. You should have a plan of action. Look for his leverage. Look about his distance. That's how you come up with your plan. But sometimes our plan doesn't always go according to plan, right? Sometimes we have to think on the fly, and this is a great example of that. So he attacks his leverage. He closes the distance. He's going at him. In our head, when we do this, we're thinking that this DB is going to hold that leverage inside. Okay, fine. I take the outside release. I'm going to work to either stack him or use that throw-by move. But since he doesn't move, we attack him and he just stays. Okay, cool. I'm going to take the inside release. Obviously, guys, when we have an inside breaking route like a post, a dig, a curl, I would love an inside release. That's in a perfect world what we want. Just sometimes it doesn't always work out like that. But if we attack a DB and he does something different, we have to be able to react. All your releases, you should be able to react. Our mindset is I'm going to close space with him. I'm going to try to give him a fake inside. But when I close space, you're gathering info on the DB. We're trying to read him. How's he playing it? Okay, he's going to sit to the outside. I'm just going to take my release and then go run my post if he wants to play it like that. So remember, guys, fifth tip to be an elite wide receiver, an elite route runner, is make sure that we know how to react on the fly. All of your press releases should be built off of a plan, but also be able to react.